What if the maps came first, and the science just caught up? Every single continent on this list was called a myth. Then geology confirmed it. Then sonar found it. And almost every time someone had already drawn it centuries before, any modern instrument could even check. Number 10, Doggerland. 120 feet. That's how far below the North Sea the forest floor sits right now, the one where a hunter stood 10,000 years ago holding a harpoon he'd carved from bone, watching prey move through trees that are long gone underwater that didn't even exist yet. In 1931, that harpoon came back up. A fishing trawler snagged something in its nets. Just a block of peat at first. Then they looked closer, the weapon was still inside. It hadn't been lost from a boat. Someone dropped it on land. Turns out there was an entire continent down there. Scans confirmed it, a landmass connecting Britain to Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany. Rivers, forests, people. Then around 6,200 BC, a massive underwater landslide off Norway sent a tsunami more than 80 feet high crashing across what was left, gone in a single day. Their tools are still washing up in fishing nets today, and on medieval maps drawn centuries before any sonar existed, coastline shapes appear in the North Sea that match Doggerland's confirmed outline with uncomfortable precision. The maps were drawn. The continent was real. The only thing missing is who told the cartographers where to look. Number 9, Beringia. You probably learned the same thing in school. A land bridge. A narrow, frozen strip. Ancient hunters walked across from Siberia to Alaska. Simple story. That story is wrong. Not a little wrong. Fundamentally wrong. In 1937, a Swedish botanist named Erik Holten introduced the word Beringia, and what researchers have confirmed in the decades since isn't a bridge, it's a subcontinent. 1.5 million square kilometers of open grassland, bigger than Alaska and Yukon put together, that existed as dry, livable land for over 20,000 years. Woolly mammoths, steppe bison, and a human population living in near total isolation for at least 10,000 of those years. We can still see the evidence in DNA. Every indigenous American alive today carries genetic signatures from that isolation from a continent that no longer exists on any map. Here's the part that gets weird. Mercator's 1569 map, made over 150 years before anyone officially confirmed the strait between Siberia and Alaska, shows territory in the northern Pacific that lines up with Beringia's submerged footprint. And it's not just Mercator. Multiple unconnected map traditions across 4 centuries show the same landmass in the same spot. The people who built the Americas watched their homeland go underwater, generation by generation. And somehow the shape of it ended up on maps made by people who had never been anywhere near it. Number 8. Greater Adria. Next time you look at a photo of Rome, the marble columns, the ancient stone, know this. You're looking at a dead continent. You just didn't know it had a name. In 2019, geologist Douwe van Hinsbergen and his team at Utrecht University published 10 years of work reconstructing what lies beneath southern Europe. What they found was a landmass the size of Greenland, Greater Adria, that slammed into the European plate about 100 million years ago. Most of it got shoved into the Earth's mantle. What was left got scraped off and crumpled into the mountain ranges we see today. The Alps, the Apennines, big chunks of Greece and Turkey, not independent geological formations. The skin of a dead continent folded and stacked. No human ever saw Greater Adria. It was gone 60 million years before we showed up, and yet, ancient Greek and Roman texts describe coastal territories in the eastern Mediterranean that don't match any shoreline we know today. Mainstream scholarship calls them errors. But Greater Adria's last exposed surface would have created coastlines that simply don't exist anymore. So where did those descriptions come from? Take that question as far back as you can, and it doesn't get easier. Number 7, Mauritius. One number ended the conventional story of the Indian Ocean, 1.97 billion. That's how old the crystals were. In 2013, geologist Trond Torsvik from the University of Oslo was analyzing beach sand from Mauritius, a young volcanic island only about 9 million years old. Buried inside that sand were zircon crystals, nearly 2 billion years old. Zircons lock in their age and never let go. The rock around them was 9 million years old. The crystals inside were nearly 2 billion. That doesn't work unless something ancient is sitting underneath that island. Seismic surveys confirmed it. A continental fragment buried under the Indian Ocean between Madagascar and India, now called Mauritius. a chunk of Gondwana broken off over 80 million years ago. Most of it drowned. A sliver survived just long enough to get pulled into a new volcanic island, where a research team happened to sieve the sand. Mauritius is real confirmed mapped. And then there's this: on several medieval and early modern maps, landmasses appear in the western Indian Ocean at positions that match its location, across traditions that had zero contact with each other. A continent that's been underwater for tens of millions of years showed up on medieval maps. Sit with that for a second. Number 6, Zealandia. In February 2017, a scientific paper quietly announced something that should have been global headline news. We've had the number of continents wrong this whole time. Earth doesn't have 7, it has 8. The missing one is called Zealandia. New Zealand is just its highest peaks above the waterline. The other 94%, roughly the size of the Indian subcontinent, is sitting 1,000 to 2,000 meters beneath the Pacific. The evidence had been in geological records for decades. Crustal structure, tectonic coherence scale, all confirmed. What was missing wasn't proof. It was someone willing to say the obvious thing out loud. Nick Mortimer from GNS Science said it in 2017. The continent got its name. Think about what that means. A landmass the size of India, in a well-traveled ocean, studied by scientists for over a century, and nobody called it a continent until 8 years ago. What else are we looking at without seeing it? Number 5. The Antarctic continent on the Orontes Phineas map. Orontes Phineas wasn't a sailor. He wasn't an explorer. He was a mathematician chair of mathematics at the College Royal in Paris, appointed by King Francis I himself. When he drew a world map in 1531, he wasn't guessing. He was calculating. At the bottom of that map is a continent, not a vague smear. A continent with specific bays, coastal inlets, river drainage patterns in the interior, and the South Pole placed in roughly the right position without ice. Antarctica wasn't officially sighted until 1820. Phineas drew it 289 years before that. The mainstream's honest position, Phineas wrote conjecture on parts of it. The idea of a large southern continent was inherited from ancient Greek theory. Maybe he was just giving shape to an old idea. But Greek theory never said which quadrant a bay should face, never described internal drainage. When scientists surveyed the subice topography of the Ross Embayment in 1949, multiple researchers independently noticed correspondence to the same region on Phineas's map. He wrote conjecture. The geometry was right anyway. Number 4, Antarctica on the Peary Race map. Let's start with the letter. In 1960, Lieutenant Colonel Harold Z. Ohlmeyer of the United States Air Force Cartographic Section evaluated a map drawn on gazelle skin in 1513 by Ottoman Admiral Peary Reis. His official written response: the geographical detail in the lower part of the map agrees very remarkably with the seismic profile made across the Antarctic ice cap in 1949. Then we have no idea how the data on this map can be reconciled with the supposed state of geographical knowledge in 1513. Public record, never retracted. The mainstream argument is that the southern landmass is just South America distorted to fit the parchment, worth taking seriously. But Peary Reis wrote notes on the map himself. He compiled it from around 20 source charts. Some, he said, going back to the time of Alexander the Great. He wasn't claiming to have seen the southern coastline. He was claiming to have copied it from something older. Those source maps have never been found, not one of them. 20 sources cited explicitly, all gone. Number 3, Kumarikandam. The Tamil Sangam literature doesn't read like myth. It reads like records. Written between roughly 300 BC and 300 AD, the texts describe a vast landmass stretching south from India into the Indian Ocean. The first Sangam lasted 4,440 years, with 549 poets. The second nearly as long, both taken by the sea. The third, the one whose texts we actually have today, was set up after survivors moved inland. Not presented as legend, presented as history. Bathymetric surveys back the basic geography up. The continental shelf south of India extends way beyond today's coastline. 20,000 years ago, sea levels were 120 meters lower. The Chagos-Lacative Ridge would have formed real exposed land stretching hundreds of kilometers into what is now open ocean. The geography the texts describe isn't impossible. It's just underwater now. If any part of that tradition is real memory, not metaphor, actual memory, then humans were passing accurate geographic information across 400 generations of oral tradition, starting from the end of the last ice age, and it survived. Number 2, the Portolan Mediterranean. Every crime scene has a criminal. The Portolan charts are the one exception. In 2015, Roel Nicolai of Utrecht University published a peer-reviewed geodetic analysis. With a single conclusion, the accuracy of portolan charts is beyond what medieval cartography could produce. The coastlines match a modern chart based on the Mercator projection, which wasn't invented until 1569, nearly 3 centuries after the charts already existed. The Carta Pisana, the oldest surviving one, dates to around 1290. No rough drafts, no cruder earlier versions. The Mediterranean and Black Sea, substantially correct, fully formed, appearing out of nowhere in a single generation. And then there are the errors. Every portolan chart, different cartographers, different countries 200 years apart, has the exact same regional inaccuracies in the exact same places. Identical. Not corrected once across 2 centuries of use by navigators who were sailing those very waters. Experience fixes errors. These didn't move. That's what copying does. When you copy from a flawed original, the flaw lives forever. Someone surveyed the entire Mediterranean before 1290 with serious institutional precision, then vanished, no name, no record, no account. The only trace they left is the accuracy itself, hidden inside a set of mistakes so consistent they became a fingerprint. Number 1. Atlantis. Around 360 BC, Plato recorded an account from Egyptian priests. A continent beyond the Pillars of Hercules, bigger than Libya and Asia combined, destroyed 9,000 years before his time. 9,000 years before 360 BC is roughly 11,600 years ago. That's the end of the last ice age. When Doggerland drowned. When Beringia went under. When sea levels rose over 100 meters and flood traditions appeared independently in dozens of cultures on every continent on Earth. Plato's date doesn't conflict with the geological record of that catastrophe. It sits inside it. The map trail doesn't close. High Brazil, a circular island bisected by a channel, appeared on European maps from around 1325, charted for 5 centuries, searched for by real expeditions pulled from maps only in the 1800s, when it was confirmed not to be at its charted location. The Piri Reis map carries an unidentified Atlantic landmass that matches nothing we know today. The mainstream says Plato invented Atlantis as a philosophical device. No confirmed geological evidence supports a sunken continent in the Atlantic at that scale. That has to be said. But you don't need a specific date to write an allegory. You don't need a location or a mechanism. Plato used all three: a date that matches the geology, a location that fits the ocean, a cause that fits the catastrophe. Every detail lines up with something real. Maybe that's coincidence. Maybe Plato was just a very precise allegorist who accidentally described an actual geological event in an actual ocean with an accurate timeline. Or maybe something was remembered, something that crossed 11,000 years of transmission through priests and philosophers and cartographers who had no idea what they were holding. And somewhere at the beginning of that chain, before the Egyptian priests, before Solon, before any of it, someone knew.